Hello, and welcome to the Back to the TARDIS podcast, the podcast where we take a look at every single episode of the 2005 revival of BBC's Doctor Who. I'm Jeff.
Hello, I'm Aurora.
And it's your boy, back at it again. It's the bitch, Avery. Woo.
And this week we are discussing Series 8, Episode 9, Flatline by Jamie Matheson. As mentioned last week, this is Matheson's second episode for the show and second consecutive episode for the show. And yeah, it's another banger. It's another really good episode, though this one delves a bit more sci-fi. I do think it's not quite as good as last week, but I still think it's a really good episode.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Absolutely. And when your previous competition is Mummies, that's even not being as good as that one and still being good, that's notable.
Yeah, I think the idea is great, and I think the visual execution of its ideas is both really well done and like a fun kind of weird off the beaten path type of thing. I think where this episode fails is the fact that aside from like Riggsy, all the side characters suck.
Yeah.
And not just in a like they're not particularly their way. Like that fucking old dude is like a terrible character. He just exists to be a bitch.
Oh, you know he uses culture as a dog whistle.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would also say the like monster plot is like
I don't know. I like the idea of the monster plot. I think it does some really interesting things, and it kind of weaponizes that the CGI looks off by a kind of intentionally leaning into it.
I think the visual design is definitely really good. Like I definitely enjoyed that really off-kilter look. That's not my problem as much of it. I just think it almost feels like a case of like playing its hand too early. Like I feel like we got to figure out what the monster was way too quick, and then the majority of the episode is just like how many different ways can we run away?
that is
it's not like a major
that is
thing.
kind of true. It was kind of a moment where like they discover what the monster was and start running through, and I look at the runtime and I'm like, 20 fucking minutes left? Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was earlier than that.
I don't
wow,
know.
Okay.
It might have been earlier. I think
It was definitely
the
earlier
point
than that.
where I was like, yes, we're in the third quarter. There was a point where I was like, yes, we're in the third quarter of the episode. And I looked at the thing and it was like, no, you have like 30 minutes left. And I was like, what the fuck?
I do think the progression of how the threat evolves kind of saves it a little bit from the fact that a lot of it is corridor running, for lack of a better term. Just like first you don't see it, then you see like the creepy like 2D like basically eating the furniture and eating the people, and then it starts to be, you know, quote unquote 3D, and then like the big hand, like, you know, there's just, I don't know. I feel like there's some creativity that saves it from being like as boring as it probably should be.
Yeah. Definitely. I feel like it's kind of just like, it does kind of feel like it pulls out the big guns a little bit too early. And it's like if you could have stayed in the build-up a little bit longer, I think it might have worked a little better. But as it is, it just feels a little bit like you jumped the gun.
Yeah, I think usually because I think with sort of like more traditional monsters, it's easier to like play your hand immediately because I don't know, there's more you can sort of do with that. But when it's like a really I don't want to say gimmicky, but like really out there thing, I think it usually pays off in these types of episodes to like let it simmer for a while and really build up that mood, and then have less running around
definitely.
at the end. It's not a major. I mean, it is kind of a detriment to the episode, but it's not like doesn't ruin the episode is what I'd say.
Yeah. I think for me it is like it has such great fucking like creepy horror in a way that I don't feel like the show has had in a while quite the same really well, but it kind of feels like it abandons that and goes into the third act action phase a little bit too early.
Yeah, I think the main like the writing is still pretty like on point enough. Like comparing it to the last episode, it's just like things just don't click quite as well. Not all of the pieces flow smoothly together because we have the monster plot, which like the Mummy is kind of gimmicky, but they do enough like well with it. And then you have like the personal drama with like Clara and Danny and the Doctor and the side characters. They just like don't mesh as well together. And then you have like the whole idea of like the classist theme with like nobody looking into this because it's like it's kind of implied it's like a poorer
it's
estate
like,
or like an estate with like more minorities, but it's just like name dropped. It's never gotten into. So things
it's like
there's still like there's quote unquote as many moving parts, but they don't like gel together. They don't work as well as like a coherent machine as the last episode does.
it's like it's a pretty good, like honestly pretty based idea. It just doesn't feel like they actually like go anywhere.
They forgot to actually write anything more about it. It's just like they're doing nothing for the poorest. Yeah, they're doing nothing for the poorest. And then at the very last minute, it's like, and this guy is violently awful.
Yeah. It like to a point where it feels cartoony, and like, you know, sometimes that kind of shit being really cartoony is kind of funny, but it's not played up in like a silly over the top RTD way. It's just kind of like, yeah, this dude sucks.
No, I was thinking about that because they basically do the same thing here that they do in Voyage of the Damned, where like the corporate asshole is one of the only people who survive, and he's way over the top in like being a terrible person. And sure, like there are that people who are like that cartoonishly like racist and classist, but like it just, I don't know, it doesn't lean into that RTD like heightened like sense of reality, if that makes sense. At least not for me. So there was some disconnect with that character, but just going back to the whole like side sort of like D plot of this being like a poor area and that's why it's not being looked into. I was thinking like this is kind of the wrong story for that, because it's like these 2D aliens aren't in this area because they know, like, because they're like poor or because they know that they'll get away with stuff for longer. It's just like a coincidence. It's just sort of, again, it doesn't gel with it doesn't even really connect with the overarching themes of like soldiers and the Doctor wondering about his like goodness, like the last episode does. It's just like, here's a side piece, and we'll leave all the thematic coherence for like the Clara and Doctor interaction throughout this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I will say, like, we talked about the effects and stuff, but I also think the delightful visual gag of the shrinking TARDIS is just delightful.
It's really
good.
Just
great. It's really fun. It's really fucking good, and it's really funny. Like, and it manages to be funny during like tense moments, like when he, in a way that feels like really well done and intentional, like the point where like the train's bearing down on him and he has to fucking Addams Family the TARDIS over to the like this side of the train tracks, and he's like, phew, I did it. And then it turns out that like in him doing that, he fell over onto the train tracks.
It's so good.
It's so good.
One thing I will say for this episode is there's like a lot of really memorable things about it. Like I remember this episode very well.
Yeah.
Just because like the concept is striking. The shrunken TARDIS is very memorable. And a lot of the like horror bits are very memorable, especially just I mean the whole like opening thing with the like human anatomy blown up on the walls.
Oh yeah. And it's a really good way to like it really feels like it it's one of those things where it really cleverly is able to get away with some really disturbing things by being abstract, like the nervous system or the skin, where it's like, yeah, it's not graphic, but it's able to paint a picture and be really like effective and horrifying despite its abstractness.
I will say the one part that like was sort of too goofy for me, where that kind of failed, was like when the big hand comes out and grabs him. It shouldn't have followed him for like 7 seconds, just like to see him scream. But that was like that was too cartoony. But yeah, otherwise it manages to do like with a TV like quote unquote appropriate for all ages like budget and like restriction. Like come across as like a menacing threat. One thing that Avery reminded me of is that I think this episode also gets like more noteworthy when, like, now looking back at like the Capaldi era like completely, in like where Clara's character goes, as like it's very like, oh yeah. I'm gonna be the doctor. Wasn't I an excellent doctor? And the fact that like I didn't really catch this before because I was like young and stupid, but the fact that like Rigsy sort of bookends, like in both situations she's helping this guy out, and in one situation it really works out, and in the other
she fucking gets herself killed.
So that was nice. And obviously it's kind of a more hindsight thing. It's debatable how much credit you want to give that to the episode, but the fact that the writers, or Stephen Moffat at least, like saw a line here and continued it through like that.
Oh no,
it's satisfying to see that
feels
type
like
of
a very intentional thing getting started, because this will come into play in the season finale, if you remember.
Yeah, but I mean, we have no idea to know the exact time frame of things, but I thought it was like sort of a last minute like reshoot decision that like Jennifer Coleman was gonna Did I say Jennifer? Jenna Louise. I know names, guys. That Jenna Louise Coleman was gonna leave, and then she like decided not to.
Well, no. I was just talking about like how in the next in the season finale, there's also a bit where she pretends to be the doctor. So like it was very clearly a thing that they were setting up to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I actually didn't remember that Rigsy is in the other episode. So that is good catch. That's a very good. Yeah. I really like just that whole conversation is really good. I think Jenna Coleman really sells it with just like how overeager and nonchalant she is about the whole thing. And just like Capaldi's look at that point is like, okay, that's not a good sign.
That's worrying. We're gonna have to deal with that at some point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's such a
No, go ahead.
There's such like a duality, or I don't know if it's intentional. It probably isn't, but the fact that we see Clara basically like gets exposed to the doctor with how the Danny situation is not what she said it was, and I'm again realizing that this is basically like how terrible Rose was to Mickey, except like worse, I think. Um because she's actively pretending like this isn't still happening, and it's an interesting note to take the character and for her to lie to the doctor, and the doctor like knows now, but he's like sort of continuing to ignore it. He just like acknowledges it and moves on, and he does the same thing with um Clara being so like happy. It's like, oh, I was a good doctor, and it's like, no, it's just like, you were excellent and goodness has nothing to do with it, and then he just sort of like leaves.
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, there's a lot of shit we need to talk about. The only drawback to that plot, it was just like, I remember the quote from the caretaker where Danny's like saying like, you have to tell me what's going on, I'm not stupid, and then he's like very stupid in figuring out what's happening with this.
It's like, man, I know that like he needs to not figure out for the sake of the plot, but like it's pretty fucking obvious what she's up to by the sound of that like phone call, especially because he's already seen her just fucking lie straight to his face about shit like that.
It's also like the fact he should at least think that she's having an affair, because he hears like jumping and like her being out of breath, and then Riggsy like yelling in the background, and I'm just like, you cannot tell me that wouldn't sound like you caught someone having sex.
It's like the other read that you can have from that is also not positive.
I mean, I'm a little worried what
like,
sex you're having that involves falling out of a window.
Hey man,
hey,
no
look,
kink shaming.
that was, but the fact that's what held this episode back for me from like being as good. There's just a few moments where it's just like characters hold the idiot ball, whether it be Danny or that probably racist jackass like just deciding to grab the TARDIS out of Clara's purse, even though he really shouldn't know that she has that. It's just, it's not as tight, it's not as put together. The atmosphere is mostly what saves it in the moment, because it's so good at keeping that momentum. But yeah, it's just not as well oiled a machine.
Okay, looking through the transcript, I will make an amendment. That like old like racist guy, it does suck as a character, but there is one funny bit that he's involved in where he's just so fucking like so much of a like dull, pathetic asshole that the psychic paper doesn't work on him because he has no imagination.
That one was good.
That's a good bit.
That's
a good bit. I will concede on that front.
Another thing I found funny, I'm probably reading into this, but it felt like that they paced it so that like a white character dies and then a non-white character dies. Like, I'm pretty sure it like goes like back and forth like every time, because there's a guy in the beginning, the police officer, one of the white community service people, one of the non-white community service people, then the other white community service person. I was just like, am I like reading into
perfectly balanced as all things should be?
Yeah, I was just like, what is happening right now? They were just like, we're doing a horror episode and the black person isn't dying first, and it's like, well, we have more people of color on the cast. It's like, fuck, we gotta like Oreo this shit or something. I don't know.
I have to say, I think it's really funny how he has this big speech after figuring out what they are, and like that they're he's like, I tried to reach out to you and contact you and talk to you normally, but it's pretty clear that you only have malicious intent. And this big speech, this plane is protected, and then he fucking goes like, I name you Boneless. And it's like, I don't even hate that name, but something about the combination of the situation and that delivery just makes it sound really fucking awkward
I have to think
and kind of
I
funny.
have to think that part was because I was paying special attention to it. There's a certain point, I think it's when he's knocked down, when the TARDIS is knocked down onto the tracks, where 12's hair is like noticeably like shorter than it is in like preceding scenes and in previous scenes, and I'm just like, did they like need more action, or did Stephen Moffat want like this big moment where he comes out and like has a big like, I am the Doctor, like Matt Smith, here's my massive cock moment, or like whatever, because I don't know, it just it's a I guess I get it, because I do, this is one of the moments I do think of as like early defining 12 moments, and I guess like maybe they wanted a stronger conclusion to things, but yeah, it's a bit of an awkward moment, because the first part of that like mini speech starts out great, and then it's just like, here's your name, and then it's done. It's
anyways, I will say it's a really fucking good episode with a lot of good bits, but I don't have too much to say about it, honestly. It's really solid. It's fun. I honestly think some of that is because like it goes a little bit, I will say like it goes a little, it as I said, it plays its hand too early, and then I think outside of like a couple like good set pieces, the back like 20 minutes kind of blurs together.
Yeah.
I will say, like, as I said, I still think it's a really, really fucking good episode, but it's not as good as last week. Kind of structurally falls apart. It is, you know what? I'll just say it. It is carried by its cool concept and like good visual execution. And some good character moments. Otherwise, it's not as great.
Is that you doing ratings, or?
No, we haven't moved on to ratings yet. That was me seeing if you got anything else to say. Cause like I'm out. And
I'm out
like,
too,
fucking, and I'm really tired. So, because I'm looking at this and I'm like, like this is we're only at like 25 minutes. Like this will be like the shortest episode we've ever done if we just release.
It won't be the shortest episode we've done. It definitely won't be.
Wait, really?
I swear we've done shorter.
I don't know. I'll go check the thing. Hello, future listener. Are you enjoying the padding that we're doing right now? This is the auditory equivalent of those bits in Evangelion where they just hover on a single shot for like a solid minute with nothing happening. That's what we're doing right now.
Okay, we had one that was like 28 minutes. Jeez, okay, maybe we do actually usually get to a lot longer.
Yeah, we usually get to like at least 30.
Can you think of another Doctor Who episode where they've just like introduced another side character like 5 minutes before it ends? Because like the train guy,
yeah, that was
I'm
so
just like,
weird. I'm like, what the fuck? Why is this guy here? I guess
like,
yeah. He feels, that character feels like he's there because they went, oh shit, like we can't just like leave that guy behind, and we probably shouldn't kill him off. So like, I don't know what to. I guess he'll just tag along then.
Yeah, there's a few bits of just like kind of awkward writing where just like they get to a place, they don't really know what to do from there, and they just kind of like keep tacking it together.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I did just remember that I will say is that I forgot to mention this. We have reached, this marks officially our 100th episode of this dumb fucking podcast.
Is this the 100th episode?
Yes, this is the 100th episode.
Oh god, and it's a train wreck.
At least, well, okay. I guess it's not like technically our wait. I guess okay. So I guess we numbered bonus episodes as like part of the actual episode run. But I guess technically, because of the weird freak accident that just manifested itself on our anchor page on April Fool's Day, technically last week's was the 100th episode, but that didn't adhere to the normal count. So this is our actual 100th episode.
That episode was non-canon. It's a filler episode.
That was episode 99, and the episode that actually came out was like episode 99 with a little apostrophe next to it, like in Evangelion, to like denote that it's like the actual episode.
The anime was getting too close to the manga, so we needed to pad out an extra episode to give the mangaka some space to get ahead.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. We needed to dip into the future timeline and pull an episode off of our Deep Space Nine run.
Anyways, I'm out of shit.
Yep.
Okay, all right. I guess we'll move on to ratings. Yeah, it's a pretty fucking good episode, honestly. It kind of falls apart in some places, and definitely can be a little bit messy, but in the end, I do think that it's a really fucking cool episode that has some really neat ideas. Even if I think a lot of the characters are unforgettable and are forgettable, and the back half really kind of just smears together and feels undistinct and not very great. So yeah, it's I'd say it's still, I'll give it an A-, I think. Let's go with that.
Yeah. This episode is very functional, which I suppose could be interpreted as an insult. I don't really mean it to. I like to think of it as like, I don't know. Imagine like an okay like built house, but it has like really pretty curtains or something. Like the episode, there's some pacing issues. Not all the themes and the narrative and the characters like completely gel with each other, but like the atmosphere and most of the character dynamics, the important characters like make it work well enough that it's an entertaining ride. The alien, the monster, is basically a gimmick, but it's a gimmick that is implemented to the greatest extent that it can be. This is really like, I think this is Jenna Louise Coleman episode, basically.
Yeah.
It's like it's her time to really like carry the majority of like it's basically like, what if a companion like had to be the Doctor, and as that
it's a Dr. Light episode, but like not as hard as some of the Dr. Light episodes from the RTD era.
It's a Dr. Light episode, except like he's basically like the guy in the chair. To use a Spider-Man No Way Home reference, sure. But yeah, aside from that, not a lot to say. The Danny Clara stuff, while it was like pretty damn good for like the past like 2 or 3 episodes that we've covered, it's starting to go on a downturn again, unfortunately. And it'll pretty much continue that way, at least from memory, until the end. So
it's fine. Next season's still really good.
So like again, you could say in the grander picture that this basically starts Clara's character arc to basically being the Doctor Light, which you can ask Donna and arguably Rose. That didn't turn out well. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, still a pretty, for writing episodes that like end up being like back to back, like still pretty damn like solid work, I think. So yeah, I'll give this a solid 8 out of 10.
Yeah, so I really agree. This is very a Clara-centric episode. I think it comes at a really interesting point in her arc and just sort of her relation to the Doctor. Yeah, especially coming off the last, like I think especially coming off of Orient Express, where she's like supposedly leaving, and then she chooses to not, and then coming straight into this episode, and she's immediately like addicted to it and just like really just getting into like being the Doctor and stuff. It's very telling about where she's at in her like attitude towards things. I think the monster plot is like it's very I think there's some good aspects to it. I think the effects are good. I think the early horror aspects to it are good. There's not much to say beyond that. The Doctor is pretty good in this episode, I think, and I think the TARDIS is utilized well. There's not much more to say. It's just like it's a good episode. It's like a 7 point.
Yeah.
6.
Sure. Fair enough. Yeah. All right then. So next week we will be is it in the Forest of the Night next week? Shit.
I saw that preview and I was like, fuck.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So until then, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at B2TARDISPod. You can support us on Patreon for a number of benefits, such as early access to episodes, the ability to listen in live to episodes being recorded, and potentially even the ability to guest star upon an episode of your choosing. And would you look at that? We made it over 30 minutes. There we go. Nailed it. Fuck yeah. 100, baby. I'm Jeff, and you can follow me on Twitter at WheatleyDL.
I'm a funky little lad with a lot of friends in my brain. You can follow us on Twitter at @ofmiceandfems.
I am full of lard.
Yum! And we will see you all next week.